We call it Denver Moves Everyone. Next slide, please. Wanted to let folks know that you have two options of accessing this meeting. If you are interested in hearing it in English, please continue on. You are in the right place. However, if you are interested in the interpretation or in Spanish interpretation, there is a globe icon in the bottom right of your screen that if you click on it, it will take you to that channel, and then you will be able to hear the presentation in Spanish. Francisco, would you like to share that information as well?
Yes, thank you. Buenas noches a todos, bienvenidos a este evento de Denver Moves y hemos organizado interpretación para el idioma español. Esta es una sesión bilingüe. Si quiere escuchar la presentación en español, seleccione el globo en la parte superior derecha de su pantalla y de esa manera van a activar el globito en un momento, pero es importante que seleccione el idioma de su preferencia para poder escuchar la interpretación al español.
Thank you very much.
And Julie, the interpretation channel has not been activated. Now it is. Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So we're going to give everybody a minute to get settled. In the meantime,
vamos a darle tiempo a la gente para que se organice. Mientras tanto,
so we're going to, we have a couple of polling questions. If you're on Zoom and you can see them, just for a minute or two.
Encuesta, y les vamos a dar un momento para que lo vean.
And once everybody gets settled in, we'll get going on the presentation.
Una vez que todo el mundo ya esté organizado, entonces empezamos con la presentación.
So, Lucy, would you like to launch our first poll?
Lucy, ¿quisiera usted hacer su primera pregunta de encuesta? ¿Qué tan seguido participa usted en los planes de transporte comunitarios? La primera respuesta siempre, la segunda posibilidad es a veces, la tercera es esta es mi primera vez. Por favor, conteste.
It sounds like, well, we just need to move. We need to move our translator to a different channel. Give us 1 second. We'll get that taken care of. Thank you so much, Joel, for letting us know that. Give us 1 second. So let us know if you have thoughts on this. We're just going to do a couple polling questions to get warmed up.
¿Piensa algún comentario en cuanto a esto?
And then we will jump right into the presentation.
Y luego empezamos con la presentación.
Right. So with that, we're going to move on to the next slide. Thank you very much. So give us 1 second and we will jump right in. Why don't you launch the second poll while we're waiting, Lucy? Thank you. How long have you lived in Denver? These are just to warm us up, to get us started before we jump right into the meat of this. So thank you. And then we have one more poll question before we get started, just to warm us all up.
Antes de comenzar.
So how do you typically get around as we're thinking about our transportation future? I need to exit out of those. So I'd like to start a little bit with just an overview of our agenda today. So we're going to talk about a little bit about who is the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure within the city that is running this plan. We're going to talk a little bit about what the plan is. What is Denver Moves Everyone, and how can you engage with us on that? Then we can get into rolling up our sleeves a little bit and talking about, as we plan for the future, what are the things that we need to be considering? What do we need to be evaluating? And then what about our draft goals for the plan? You know, we've already started a little outreach at this point, and we'll share some of that feedback with you. So we've used that as a basis to develop the goals for what we're trying to accomplish with this plan. And then we'll talk a little bit about what comes next. And what you're going to see at each phase of these, we're going to have the opportunity for you to share thoughts with us. This is a very large group. We've got quite several hundred people on here. So the best ways to access would be, if you're on the Zoom call, just put your information in the chat, and you can put it in English and Spanish. We will get that translated. Or if you have joined us via the phone, we are very excited to have you. Please hit *3 and you will be switched to an operator, and you can share your feedback. You can ask questions and provide us any other thoughts that you might have. We do have a lot of folks. We're hoping for a lot of feedback. We will highlight as much of it as we can, but know that everything that you are passing on to us, we are tracking, and we're going to incorporate into our deliverables moving forward. So we're very excited to have you join us and to move forward with this plan. So next slide, please. I'd like to introduce our speakers. These will be our panelists this evening. Jen Hillhouse, she is the Director of Transportation with the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. She's going to kick us off here. Then we have Sam Piper, who is our city lead on this. He's our project manager through the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. Got Evan Anderson and myself. We are consultants on the team. I work on the outreach side, and Evan is our technical lead and our project manager. And then we have Alana Miller who will be available to answer any questions really related to climate change or climate issues. So with that, I'd love to hand it over to Jen. Would you like to kick us off and give us a little bit of a welcome?
Of course. Thank you, Julie. And good evening, everyone. As Julie mentioned, my name is Jennifer Hillhouse. I'm the Director of Transportation Mobility Planning for DOTI. And you'll learn a little bit more about who DOTI is and where we've come. But we're very excited to be kicking off Denver Moves Everyone 2050. Our last strategic transportation plan was developed in 2008. And as you all know, a lot has changed in our city since then. So long overdue to be able to create a vision for our future. So this plan will do just that. You know, you'll help to shape our mobility future for walking, biking, taking transit, and driving, and really look at how the investments and priorities are defined over the next 30 years. So not a small feat here. So again, thank you for being here. We really look forward to your feedback and engagement, and a special thanks to our city council members for their continued support in the mobility space, as well as helping us to promote this event. So stay engaged. We really appreciate you being here and look forward to all that you have to offer. So I'll hand it back to you, Julie.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And as Jen mentioned, what's so exciting about this plan is the foundation of this plan is feedback that we're receiving from our community members, from our industry partners, and from everyone that we're working with that works in this space. Because as we know, transportation touches every aspect of our lives. So what you see on this slide is there are 4 major phases of this project. I'm not going to go through all of them now, but again, what you'll see is that at each phase, there is an opportunity for you to engage. There's an opportunity for you to provide your feedback, and we would love to hear your thoughts. So next slide, please. Let's talk about how you can do that. If you catch one thing from this presentation, this is what we'd love for you to remember: www.denvermoveseveryone.com. We have an engagement tool online in multiple languages, asking you some questions, providing you a little history. So it's really a wonderful way to engage. However, if that doesn't work for everyone, we also have our project hotline. You can call us directly, 303-524-8340, or you can send us an email directly, info@denvermoveseveryone.com. We're also going to be doing office hours. We're going to have pop-up events in your neighborhood, and you can also take a look at our website or follow us on Twitter or Facebook. So keep this one in mind, denvermoveseveryone.com. You'll hear that throughout the presentation because we would really love your thoughts for you to go on and participate in that engagement tool. So with that, I would love the opportunity to hand this over to Sam Piper, who's going to talk to us a little bit more about the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. Sam?
Hi, Julie. Thank you so much. And good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us tonight to have a discussion about the future of Denver's transportation system. So we're going to talk a lot tonight about this project, Denver Moves Everyone, what it entails, and what we need your feedback for so that we can develop a plan that reflects your values and your vision. But before we do that, we want to take a step back. And my name is Sam Piper. I'm a transportation planner with the Denver Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. Sometimes this evening, you'll hear to our organization referred to as DOTI. And we wanted to take some time to explain what are the responsibilities of DOTI and what do we manage? Next slide. So DOTI is responsible for managing what we call the public right-of-way. And so that is the space between buildings. And when we think about that space, whether it's roadways or streets, there fundamentally is a lot of elements. And that's everything that goes on top of our public right-of-way, including street signs, street lights, and the asphalt and concrete that builds our streets. It also includes the elements that move people along our corridors. And that's everything from sidewalks to bus lanes, our vehicle lanes, as well as bike lanes. And it also entails the things that are a little bit harder to see. That's the stormwater infrastructure, so that when it rains, that water is conveyed to pipes underneath the ground. And it also is the technology that connects our infrastructure, such as fiber optic lines and other things that keep our transportation system moving. Next slide. And when we think about what are our specific responsibilities for maintaining the highest and best use of the public right-of-way to move all people, all sorts of different ways, we wanted to just walk through and highlight how do we design and how do we build that transportation system. And so we are responsible for building and maintaining streets, designing and building intersections, bridges and structures that help us to cross Interstate 25 or waterways, as well as conveying water across our city. Big stormwater infrastructure projects. People may be familiar with the 39th Ave Greenway and the new infrastructure north of the Park Hill Golf Course. All of that infrastructure is the responsibility of DOTI. And when we think about mobility infrastructure, this is the way that we move people in our city. We are responsible for regulating the development of sidewalks, designing and implementing bikeways and trails. We now have the responsibility and the opportunity to operate transit in partnership with RTD, and also designating space on our roadways to make transit more efficient. Also crosswalks and intersection improvements for pedestrians. We're also responsible for operating our transportation system. People may have seen over the past decade, bike share, B-cycle, which now has converted into e-bikes that are available to the public on our streets, as well as scooters. We're responsible for curbside management, and that's where people can park. How do we regulate parking? How do we regulate where we can load vehicles adjacent to the curb? So all of that signage is the responsibility of our agency. Also traffic signals to keep traffic moving safely along our corridors and efficiently, and the street lights that help light our city up at night. And coming full circle, there's also responsibility to regulate and maintain our transportation system. And so as new buildings and development comes to our city, we have standards that require developers to meet those specific standards for how wide a sidewalk needs to be and how wide the space needs to be where we plant trees. We enforce the regulations on our streets when it comes to signage, as well as parking regulations. We are responsible for paving our streets and then maintaining those streets too, sweeping and plowing them so that they're passable in the winter months and clear of debris in the warmer months of the year. And so that's just an overview of all of the responsibilities of the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. Now we wanted to take a deeper dive into the project, which is the important subject of this evening, Denver Moves Everyone. And this project is really focused on developing a plan for our transportation system. All of those moving pieces that I talked about on the previous part of the presentation is the responsibility of improving through this project. Next slide. And so Denver Moves Everyone is what we call our strategic transportation plan. This plan will become the North Star to prioritize and program transportation investments in the near term, all the way out to the year 2050. So it's a long-term visionary transportation plan. This plan will sit at the same level within the Denver Right planning framework that initiated and completed in 2019 to be a complement to Game Plan, which is the strategic plan for Denver Parks and Recreation, with Blueprint Denver, which is the strategic plan for community planning and development. So up to this point, and as Jen noted, we had not completed a strategic transportation plan since 2008. And this plan will become the umbrella plan for all of our other sub-plans, which I'll talk about how these plans fit together. But the point being is that this is our critical plan that had remained a gap, that we didn't have a strategic plan helping us to develop a vision and goals to program investments for our transportation future. And so since 2008, Public Works at the time has changed a lot. And so this timeline emphasizes how the responsibilities of what we are now today, the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, has evolved. We created our first Denver Moves Bikes plan to determine where should we make investments to make it easier, safer, and more comfortable to bicycle. We hired our first city pedestrian planner, and they were responsible for publishing the city's first pedestrian and trails plan, which completed in the year 2019. During the same period, Denver also became a Vision Zero city. And what Vision Zero means is we have a commitment to eliminate serious injuries and fatalities on our streets to zero by the year 2030. So we developed a whole new program that is oriented at identifying where problems exist from a safety lens and helping to develop solutions that enable us to move closer to that goal. We also developed the city's first transit plan, Denver Moves Transit. And as the city voters actually changed our charter for our agency from Denver Public Works to the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, we, for the very first time, gained the opportunity to actually operate transit. And so we developed a whole transit planning team in the last decade, and we now have our first DOTI transit director, really looking to make more investments into transit so that we can move more people more efficiently and safely on our streets. So our responsibilities have evolved a lot in only a decade. And we just wanted to clarify why planning is so critical. Planning is the mechanism by which we identify what the community's priorities are, what our goals are for our transportation system, and all of the various pieces of that transportation system so that we can prioritize those investments that have the best chance of helping our city to reach our goals through new infrastructure improvements. And so when we look at Denver Moves Pedestrians and Trails, Denver Moves Bicycles, Denver Moves Transit, and Denver Moves Downtown, we can see a clear link between these planning projects and actual projects that get built that advance our goal to make our city safer, healthier, more connected, and have a more reliable and efficient transportation system that moves everyone together. And when we think about planning a system, we wanted to emphasize that Denver Moves Pedestrians and Trails, Denver Moves Bicycles, and Denver Moves Transit are focused on moving that specific mode of transportation that we call that way that bicyclists move, pedestrians move, and transit moves. But when we think about the way that we all move, we may take a bus, we may ride a bike sometimes, we may drive, and we may walk some places. And so Denver Moves Everyone is different in that it takes a system-wide approach. How do all of these pieces need to work together so that we can develop a transportation system that can move everyone forward and represent our vision to move people, goods, and services more efficiently and safely as we look over the plan's 30-year vision. And so what will this plan deliver? Why is it so important that you share your voice into this transportation project? And so what we will be doing through this plan is establishing a vision and goals that are used to prioritize DOTI's transportation investments into the future. And so this plan will result in a list of transportation investments that we intend to make in the next 4 to 6 years, using that goal framework to prioritize those projects that have the best chance of reaching the goals established through the plan. And thinking again of that system-wide approach, thinking about all the investments that we need to make into the different ways and infrastructure that helps people to travel in our city, as well as how do we operate our transportation system and how do we maintain our transportation system. And then as we look out into the year 2050, and we do recognize that's a long ways away and there's significant changes that could come, but we need to be thinking ahead. What changes do we need to plan for? What changes could happen? What changes are less likely to happen? And how can we kind of future-proof our planning efforts so that we react less and we're more proactive in really navigating trends of the future so that we can continually make progress on our goals? And so we'll be making long-term policy and program recommendations to guide DOTI towards achieving the vision and the goals that we established for this plan, both in the short term as well as in the long term. Next slide. And so just to reaffirm, Denver Moves Everyone is a plan that looks at across all of the assets, all of the infrastructure within our transportation system, from roadways to bikeways to moving freight, transit, and people walking, and develops a connected framework about how do we make investments in the entire transportation system to move Denver closer to the goals that we established with you during this planning effort. And this plan is a 2-year planning effort. We kicked off this project a few months ago in the summer of 2021, and we anticipate working with the community and stakeholders through the next several months, all the way to the fall of 2022. And so we're just about halfway through the first phase of our project, where we're really seeking to set the foundation and understand where we are today. What are the problems that our transportation system is facing? How have we grown in the past? What policies have helped us to make progress? And where do we continue to face weaknesses that prevent DOTI from really delivering on all of the responsibilities and maintaining a high level of customer service in delivering a high quality transportation system for residents, visitors, and employees of our city? So we'll use this first phase of the project to understand where we are today. Then we'll move into the second phase of the project, where we really determine where do we want to be when we look out 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. What type of transportation system is going to really meet all of the needs and the goals of our city? Where are we going and where do we want to be? We'll work with the community to understand which futures we want to plan for. And then we'll move into the third stage of the project to determine precisely, based on the desirable futures, how do we program transportation investments that enable us to build that future? And then what other policies and program recommendations and financial strategies do we need to have planned for so that we can continually make progress on those goals over the plan's 30-year horizon? And then we'll move to the final phase of the project. And this is what we call tracking our progress. And so during this phase, we'll take a shorter term look about what are those actions that we need to accomplish in the next 2 to 3 years. What are those midterm recommendations that we need to continue to have on our radar? so that we can evaluate how successful we are in implementing the plan's recommendations. And we'll be also creating dashboards that make it easy for the public to see how DOTI is doing implementing the plan's recommendations so that we can ensure that this plan is transparent. This phase will be critical to enable us to see, are we on track? And if we're not, what changes we need to make to get back on track so that we can continually move the needle on reaching the plan's goals and eventually achieving our plan's vision. And Julie mentioned this, but we're several times throughout this meeting going to emphasize denvermoveseveryone.com. We hope that you have visited this website in the past, and if you haven't, please bookmark this page. We're going to have opportunities for you to engage in this project throughout the entire length of the project, the whole 2-year planning process. Right now, we're asking questions about goals, and Evan and Julie will talk more about that this evening, but we just wanted to emphasize that this is the home base for the project. And please bookmark this page and share it with your friends, your family, and your network so that we can cast a wide net and hear from all voices on this critically important project for our community and for our future.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Sam. That was a lot of information. So we want to take a pause here for a second. Love to get your feedback. Now you know a little bit more about the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, the plan we are working on, our long-term strategic plan for transportation in the city, and would love your thoughts. What would you like this plan to accomplish? And so feel free to use the chat. If you are on the phone, hit *3, and feel free to ask us questions. Ask us questions about DOTI, ask us questions about the plan, and let us know what would you like to see this plan accomplish? Sam, I did get one question. I was just kind of going through the chat while we're waiting. Get some questions about what, there's been a lot of initiatives that the city has put forward in the past. Are these going to be incorporated into this plan, or how are we going to address some of the previous studies that have been done? Do these get incorporated? How is this plan going to be different? Perhaps you could start us off with that.
Planning will inform this plan, and we like to think about planning as a bit of a circle. And so let's just use the example of Denver Moves Transit. Denver Moves Transit is going to make recommendations that are aligned with the goals of that specific plan and identify priority projects that we need to make investments in. Those projects will then go into the Denver Moves Everyone framework, and we'll consider those high priority recommendations against high priority recommendations from other input factors, whether that be Denver Moves Downtown, a neighborhood planning effort happening in Northeast Denver. And we will analyze all projects against a consistent prioritization methodology so that we're advancing those projects that, again, have the best chance of helping our entire city to reach the mobility goals established through this plan. And then as Denver Moves evolves, we will make recommendations, and in turn, those recommendations help to influence how we prioritize transit, bicycling, walking investments in the future. So it becomes cyclical. There's a cycle here, but absolutely the plans that we've developed to date have a huge influence on Denver Moves Everyone, and then Denver Moves Everyone in turn will influence those plans as those plans are updated in the future.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Another question I think I'm going to throw to Alana. What specific strategies is Denver planning to pursue to make transportation greener, more equitable and accessible and efficient? So kind of from a climate perspective, Alana, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share with us on that?
Julie, and to whoever asked that, I think that's some of what this plan is going to do, is dig into the specifics of what needs to happen. But we do know that transportation is the second leading source of greenhouse gas emissions in the city and the largest source of air pollution. So it definitely needs to be addressed. Most of that pollution does come from personal vehicles. So we know that shifting to a more multimodal system, including having efficient transit and access to safe biking and walking, and expanding options for people who want to take those, will do a lot to green up our system. So definitely appreciate all of your ideas and engagement around what specifically that should look like.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Getting great feedback in the chat. And don't forget *3 if you're on the phone, you'd like to share. Getting a lot of comments on prioritizing transit, Getting comments. First one was sidewalks, and we got some, yes, what Mr. Basket said relative to sidewalks. I think that's excellent. Safety, obviously safety is a big concern. Absolutely, as we're moving forward in the perception of safety in our neighborhoods. Let's see, what other questions do we have? Some discussion about how, so Evan, maybe this is a good question for you. How do things like technology improvements and autonomous vehicles, how will those tie to the plan moving forward?
It's a great question, Julie, and I think we're all thinking about how we might view the future. We're actually going to touch on that a little bit more, and would love to hear more of your ideas for some of the trends and issues. But this is a system-wide plan that will evaluate different alternative futures, including the potential impacts of autonomous vehicles. And the future is uncertain. We're facing a lot of risks and disruption. And as Sam noted, this will be a plan that will really provide that agility and flexibility for DOTI to respond to new evolutions and new revolutions in transportation and mobility. So we're looking forward to addressing that as we begin the scenario and the future analysis phase, where we'd also welcome your input into that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you. Keep the thoughts coming. Again, what would you like to see accomplished in this plan? If we are successful with our long-term transportation plan, what would you like to see? Other feedback we're getting is very along the lines of I'd like this plan to completely alter the transportation fabric of the city. We have received a lot of comments around so much of the past designs of the city have been really focused on cars and people moving around via cars. And what would that look like if we looked at some of the other modes of transportation? So I think that's excellent. Let's see, what other questions? Bring back the trolleys. I like it. If you look back historically, we had more multimodal options in the city. Now we don't have as many. So I think there's some good feedback to be thinking outside of, what are we thinking from a car, or what are we thinking, in terms of what's the best way to get around, and it's not necessarily always cars. Let's see, here's a question. Is there a concrete goal to reduce the number of personal vehicles on the road by 2030 or 2050? Will the plan actually set those types of targets? I don't know, Sam or Evan, if that's a thought. Do you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, Julie, I actually saw that in the chat. I'm glad we brought that one to the front. So one of the goals of this plan is to understand how our city is going to continue to change and grow based on population changes, demographic changes, as well as from a land use perspective. What if trends of the past are continued into the future, we do anticipate that Denver's population is going to grow. And when we think about a transportation system, you might consider it kind of like a straw. There's only so much space that we can move people through. And so while through this plan, we won't necessarily have a concrete number for removal of personal vehicles, what we do want to understand is how do we more efficiently move more people through that constrained space, which using that analogy, you could think of as that straw. And so currently, and Evan will speak to this, we'll show how many people when they commute to work, commute by driving alone versus other modes of transportation. And just as a simple example, if you think about how many people can fit on a bus versus how many people can fit in an individual vehicle, we can move more people if more people are taking the bus or light rail, more people who could fit on a sidewalk or in a bike lane versus a personal vehicle. So to answer this question, we are going to be evaluating the growth of our city, and if we were to maintain the same ratio of driving, walking, bicycling, taking transit, how congested our city would be, how bad traffic would be in the future, and then contemplate solutions so that we can move more people on our constrained right-of-ways well into the future. So we will be evaluating that question through this project.
Fantastic. We're also getting quite a few questions, and this could be Sam or Evan that could help us answer this. We're getting a lot of questions about the interrelationships between different modes of travel And, potentially that's caused some of the comments, or that's caused some safety issues when I'm trying to, manage between a protected bikeway and a sidewalk and the traffic. And then there's feedback asking people or asking, how do we do a better job of interconnecting the system so that we give space for all sorts of different modes of travel? Do you, Sam or Evan, do you have any thoughts on how we might address that in our plan?
So, Evan, you go first, and I'll if I can add something if needed.
I just want to note there are some absolutely great comments and chats coming in, and we were truly taking all this to heart. But particularly, there was a great comment there about kind of, how can we create a right-of-way or a mobility delight czar, so that our public spaces become, friendly and open and accessible and comfortable, and move people with dignity and humanity. Many of our streets truly are and should be for the people, and understanding the connections across the system. As we highlighted earlier, the transportation system that DOTI manages is made up of many different elements, and there's even potential for future expanding roles into air rights and curbside management and technology. And that's really the crux and the core of this Denver Moves Everyone plan, is to look at that system level approach to how we move people and goods and services more safely and efficiently. There's no clean answers, but the opportunity to have discussions with the public and the partners, to model and test different scenarios, to do our homework to understand what some of the most effective programs and policies and interventions and best practices from around the world that we can bring here to Denver and continue to innovate will be a core focus of this strategic system-wide plan.
Terrific. We have time for a couple more before we jump into the next one. Getting some questions about Vision Zero. The Vision Zero, the plan may be complete, but it feels like at least there's some comments that maybe we have some work to do in this area. And we also got a question about sort of where the Vision Zero goal came from. So Sam, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about how this plan and this effort will move forward with our Vision Zero goals for the city.
Yes, absolutely. So Evan will discuss a critical report that we're working hard to develop right now, and that's called the State of the System Report. And on the safety front, we want to use that report to understand trends around safety, both the facts of safety, the number of crashes, why crashes are occurring, the number of fatalities on our street, and how those trends have changed. We also want to evaluate perceptions of comfort, whether you're traveling using mode X or Y. We're going to be crunching a lot of data in that report to understand what are the trends and the contributors to those serious injuries and fatalities that are occurring on our street, so that we can have a better sense of the solutions that are necessary to reach our vision and our goal to eliminate serious injuries and fatalities to zero by 2030. So this plan will do a thorough analysis of the problem and contemplate solutions that enable us to act more strategically to reach that goal over the next decade.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Sam. Another question I can talk a little bit about is we're getting some questions on the phone as well as in the chat about who we're coordinating with, how are we gathering data for this? And that's a fantastic question. As we mentioned, the foundation for this entire plan is based on feedback from the public, feedback from our partners, and feedback, from our city council, feedback from our elected officials, feedback from the other organizations within the city. So, for example, we have established a steering committee. It's called our think tank, where we brought in industry experts to come in and talk to us. And then as a subset of that, we're also pulling in, we're calling them focus groups, where we're taking an individual technology focused group like freight, like transit, like technology, like community and equity, bringing these folks together and really brainstorming what these issues are and how we can make sure that we're addressing all of the different aspects that touch transportation. That is combined with our online engagement, our grassroots engagement, where we're actually going out to the individual neighborhoods, and we're having events and asking people questions, as well as joining other committee structure meetings and really doing as much as we can to integrate with the other projects going out of the city. So there's a really huge concerted effort about coordinating all of our efforts to make sure that we are being effective and efficient, but also making sure that we are not missing any best practices and terrific ideas that are out there across our industry partners, the public, and the other projects that we're working on. So with that, we've got, oh my gosh, we've got such great feedback coming in. Thank you guys so much. We are absolutely capturing all of these thoughts. But I do want to make sure we stay on schedule. So with this, I think I will hand off next to Evan to start talking a little bit about how do we do this, understanding our past and how do we plan for the future. Evan, would you like to jump in on that?
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, everyone. And please do keep those chats and comments coming. We are monitoring those and taking those back as critical feedback. We've got well over 100 folks on the Zoom platform and several 100 more joining us by phone as well. So this is a great group. And again, this feedback is absolutely wonderful to see. I think as we continue on in our presentation this evening, kind of understanding where we have been, how our city has evolved, how our transportation system has transformed over the past decades is really helpful for thinking about how we might transform in the future. 100 years ago, our streets were designed for people and safe for everyone. 60 years ago, we built new highways and interstates through many of our communities of color and divided those neighborhoods permanently. Even 40 years ago, we were grappling with the brown cloud, air quality, and smog from traffic and transportation. We're looking back through this effort to understand how many of those historical decisions have lasting legacies and impacts on a lot of the transportation issues and mobility issues that we continue to face. Thinking now about today, we do recognize, and many of us on the phone will recognize as well, that we are continuing to change and grow significantly. Looking back at over the past 10 years, we're welcoming more and more people and new residents to our city. More and more visitors are finding Denver to be a world-class attraction and a world-class place to do business, to start a business, to grow. As we look out over the next 30 years, we also understand that we'll continue to change and adapt. We're likely to become a more diverse city. Our aging residents and our elderly population will continue to grow as a share. Some of these changing demographics will bring new mobility challenges that we need to start planning for today. And we're facing a lot of critical issues related to transportation, from our air quality to addressing climate change, to understanding affordability and the cost of transportation for households and workers and residents, to thinking critically about safety and addressing that Vision Zero goal, and thinking about how we can better move goods and freight in a new world, and thinking less about how we can manage or build our way out of congestion, but instead encourage a more reliable commute times across mode. And of course, how we can better maintain the system of our expanding assets and improve the maintenance of those assets overall. Many of these critical issues do intersect with how we move as a city. We do understand that transportation is a regional issue. Many workers and residents commute in and out of the city of Denver, primarily by vehicle. When we also look at the trips that are taken within our city, nearly 4 in 10 of those are taken by biking or walking, bus or rail. We recognize the unique opportunities that Denver has to encourage and expand access to different modes, shift our travel behaviors, transform the way we move, and address some of those critical issues that we're facing today. Traffic is an ever-present and very visible issue for all of us, particularly in the mornings and the evenings as we travel to and from work. You might ask yourself where you find yourself in that pie chart here that shows, how do you primarily get to work? Whether by vehicle, carpooling, walking, bus. How can we continue to make alternative options accessible, convenient, comfortable, fast, and easy for everybody? Because cities across the country are facing the challenge of how we address moving more and more people and more goods. And Denver's at an inflection point. We have the opportunity through this plan, through conversations with you all, to choose our path forward and how we kind of transform how we move, whether we become a more car dependent culture and city, or whether we expand options and become less car dependent overall. We think about safety too, and just how critical it is that we feel comfortable when we're traveling on our roads, our sidewalks, our bike passes, our buses. Understanding that we have a significant challenge ahead of us to meet that Vision Zero goal. We do have more and more residents, more and more vehicles, and more progress to be made to make streets safer for everybody. We also understand there's significant implications for communities of color and different vulnerable users that are impacted by our system, recognizing that the majority of our serious and fatal injuries occur in many of our lower income and communities of color. So as we think about some of those current and present day issues, some of the trends we've already highlighted in the chats and the comments, we want to kind of open it up again and hear more from you about what we should be thinking about in the future as we plan.
Great. Thank you so much, Evan. Again, put your comments in chat or hit *3 if you're on the phone. We did get a question about how many folks we had joining us. We have over 2,000 on the phone and over 100 on our Zoom call. So we are absolutely thrilled to have that number of people. So we're excited. Also got a question about whether we will be making the recording and the slides available. We absolutely will. We will be posting them on our website, and you will be able to access those as well after the meeting. So with that, to Evan's question, so what trends, so when you look to the future, when you look at see where things are moving forward, what do you think we should be planning for? What are those trends that you're seeing that this plan really needs to address? Let's see, feedback we're getting. We're getting some great feedback. Good reminder, I totally agree with this. We should be using crashes instead of incidents. I think that is a kind of an industry standard. I think that is a great comment. Thank you very much for the couple folks that have raised that. So we're getting questions about, let's see, 2,000. Oh, we have 2,000 or over 2,000 on the phone. So we had a question about numbers. So it's over 2,000 on the phone and over 100 on the Zoom call. So question about from a safety perspective, we have been decreasing the speeds, but yet there seems to be still having a lot of crashes and a lot of deaths. Evan, are you seeing that as a trend across the country?
Certainly, safety is a challenging issue with many external forces. Again, how we're commuting, the economy, travel behaviors, very interesting patterns as we kind of look at the impact of COVID in the last year on some of our fatal crashes. But certainly, while we continue to make targeted investments and improvements, particularly the Department of Transportation Infrastructure is pulling the investment levers that they can. We do recognize that the travel behaviors, substance abuse, drinking and driving, the size of our vehicles, many of these other things are significant factors as we think about how safe our system is. DOTI is really focused on those infrastructure improvements, visibility, protection, expanding our sidewalks, reducing speeds, the things that are directly within the department's control, while also working with our enforcement partners, education, and changing people's behaviors overall. We recognize this is a very hard hill to climb, but a significant focus of the agency moving forward.
Thank you, Evan. Sam, a couple of questions that we've gotten around. If you were living in a community of color, and if you look historically, there are areas that have not received the same level of an investment. So just a couple of questions around, if we look, obviously we don't want that to be a trend in the future, and how can this plan help us think about that a little differently as we look at equity and moving forward in transportation?
Yeah, absolutely. So equity, as we went out to the public and asked what are the values that we need to be planning for the future of our transportation system, it became clear that our community desires a more equitable transportation system where we're making the right transportation investments in the communities that need those investments most. Historically, neighborhoods and communities in Denver have had less access, which has had impacts and created disparities in terms of outcomes, whether that be travel time to get to work. Do they have access to a vehicle? And if they don't, what are their options for traveling within their community? As well as Evan noted, pollution, it remains concentrated along our interstate corridors. And though in where we have higher rates of pollution, that has a link to higher rates of asthma, especially in children. And our higher equity areas are located along our interstate corridors. And so through this planning effort, and again, in the State of the System report that we will be developing in the month of September, we want to document where disparities in our transportation exist and where investments may be historically underrepresented, and how we can make into the future plans to make those investments in the communities that need them most and that provide more access. And so we'll be using different tools to understand trends in the past. And as we look to the future, what are those investments needed to connect more people in every community so that all residents have the opportunity to thrive.
Thank you, Sam. Elena, I think I might hand this one off to you. We're getting some great comments on needs for more shade and the reality that there could be a trend, obviously the natural trends of climate change. And as the city gets hotter, how do you see these things being incorporated into this plan from a climate perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. I mean, we've certainly seen that with this summer, that it's been incredibly hot. And we know that in certain parts of the city, it even feels hotter with lack of shade and tree coverage and with air pollution. So there are a lot of issues that are coming together there. That being said, it can also use a lot of water for trees. So we want to be thoughtful about the type of landscape that we're using. But overall, I think this plan will help us build livable streets that help people get around and feel comfortable no matter how they're traveling. So I think that's a really important point.
Excellent, thank you. A lot of feedback on densification. I think we're all recognizing that one of the trends for the future is population growth as we're moving forward. Evan, I'd like to have you talk a little bit about, we've got some really interesting feedback in the chat around connectivity, and that there are areas of the city that are wonderfully connected and there are areas of the city that are not. How much of that is going to be focused as we're evaluating the future transportation options?
Thank you, Julie, and thank you for that. We're certainly looking significantly at connectivity and access. We'll touch a little bit more on the State of the System publication, which is coming up, which will really kind of lay out where our gaps and our challenges are. We'll also be, as we kind of explore different futures and really look at those investments that'll move us closer to our system-wide and our citywide goals, we'll be using those metrics of connectivity and access to high quality transit, access to jobs, access to options beyond a vehicle for shopping and work and education. Those will really be some of our critical benchmarks that we're going to be evaluating, some of the future progress, some of those key improvements, priority actions, projects and programs moving forward. So many of these principles that we're hearing, all these great comments that we're hearing will really become kind of the foundation for how we're evaluating different futures in the forward. I'm seeing great comments come in on electrification, electric vehicles, e-bikes, autonomous vehicles, mobility as a service, as well as significant threats and disruptors and trends that are out there related to land use, densification. Who knows what the future will hold, but we're going to be holding ourselves to those core metrics of how easy, safe, convenient it is to get around, measured by things like connectivity and accessibility, to evaluate where we need to go in the future and what those priority investments we will make to get there.
Excellent, thank you. And kind of building on that, Sam, we are getting a lot of comments about mobility as a service and electric vehicles and e-bikes and all these different modes. So how is this plan going to address that? Is the plan, obviously we're getting a lot of feedback that it feels like historically we've been too reliant on cars and vehicles. So as we move forward, how are we going to be looking at this from a multimodal umbrella?
Yeah, absolutely. So just thank you for that question. It's a great one. And to kind of parse that apart, I do want to emphasize that that technology and transportation is changing. And if we look into the past decade, we go back 10 years, we did not have Uber, we did not have Lyft, we did not have a bike share system, and we didn't have scooters. And now we fast forward to 2021, and look, we have all of those things. And so we can anticipate that the pace of technology is going to continue to speed up as we look into the future. And what we need to do through this planning effort is understand which of those technologies are likely to happen, which technologies may not come for a long time, and potentially which policies we need to have on deck so that we're not reacting to technologies, but we're being proactive and we're making sure that they don't have impacts that are negative on our community. We're working with a network of experts across the city as well as across the nation to help us understand those technological shifts as we think about the future. The one thing that's a guarantee is that transportation is going to continue to change. And when we think about the length of this planning, 30 years, we know a lot can change. And through this process, we want to understand which changes are likely to happen, and working with our network of experts, really helping us to understand the policies that we need to get ahead of so that we're managing these changes in a proactive manner. Fundamentally, this plan is about moving more people on our streets, and technologies could be part of that solution. But we want to be clear that technologies are not a silver bullet. All of the problems that Evan emphasized when we think about health and climate, as well as the way we move people on our streets, safety, not all of that can be solved with technology alone. So we need to think about behavior change and how we leverage technology as a piece of the solution, but we can't rely on that as the silver bullet solution in isolation. Again, why this plan is so important. There's a lot that we need to think about. And so we're leveraging our community as well as experts to help us think through those futures so that we can be prepared to deliver the transportation system that works for the most people in the future.
Fantastic. And to kind of take that a little bit further, I think, and maybe this is a good question for Evan, we're asking, there's a lot of comments in the chat about partnerships. You know, is this something that DOTI is doing alone, or are there opportunities for the city to partner with maybe the private sector or RTD or some other areas? And will that be evaluated as part of this plan?
Thank you, Julie. And we do have the Director of Transportation and Mobility from DOTI with us too, who might be able to address this. But absolutely, I think as we mentioned earlier, transportation is a regional issue, and will absolutely take the collective efforts of the public agencies, our community organizations, our businesses, our major employers.
Oh, I think we lost Evan.
Together.
Oh, we lost you there for a second. Evan, you might want to back up.
Can you hear
Julie,
me now, Julie?
yeah.
Oh, yes, now you're good. Sorry about that.
Absolutely. I think we're just reinforcing that that's a wonderful comment, and we do recognize that the partnerships are critical to implementing this plan overall.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Sorry, Sam, did you have something to add to that, or?
No, I just was going to say, if Evan went offline briefly, Julie, I'd be happy to step in. But thank you, Evan, for covering that. We appreciate it.
Wonderful. We're getting a lot of comments about safety. I know that that's been a theme that's coming up quite a bit. There's a whole discussion on the chat around feeling safe downtown, feeling safe on our bicycles. So there's a component of safety. Some of the comments are related to personal safety and actually, you know, crime, bike theft, but then there's some related to space on the roadways, making sure that you feel safe when you're actually interacting with traffic and things along those lines. So really great feedback along those lines that we will continue evaluating as well. So lots of fantastic comments coming in. You guys this is great, and we really appreciate that. But with that, I'd like to have Evan talk a little bit about the values and goals for the plan and some of the work that we've done up to this point to build the foundation for our first deliverable, which will be in the next month or so, the State of the System report. Evan, would you like to jump in?
Thank you, Julie. And again, thank you, everyone. The chats that are coming in are absolutely great. We are reading and responding to those. And that's really kind of what we want to talk a little bit more about in this next section of our meeting tonight, is really how we're listening and learning directly from you all to help build the framework for this plan. We are looking to build out a performance-based process to implement the vision, the goals that you all have told us are important, and to build that plan that'll really help us prioritize those right investments at the right time, at the right space. Right now in this early
Sam, we may have to have you step in for Evan here.
Absolutely.
outcomes so that we can build that performance-based framework and then align some of those critical actions, strategies, recommendations, and the measures for us to track moving forward. Because we really can't manage what we can't measure, and this plan will result in a collective performance-based planning framework that establishes those targets, metrics, and the goals to help us achieve this overall vision, and that ties everything together into that system-wide approach that'll lay out where we need to invest to make progress, to transform our system, to achieve many of the comments that you've told us here today over the next 4 to 6 years, and then moving forward through 2050. We'd like to think a little bit here tonight about how we might establish that vision. So please do go ahead and use the chat, and we're have an opportunity to kind of think about how you envision Denver in 2050. The purpose of the vision is really to kind of set that aspirational goal of who and what we will be as a city in 2050 and what our transportation.
Yeah, so just to pick up where Evan left there, if you could just, in one word, what is your vision for the future of transportation in Denver, and drop that into the chat.
Or hit *3 if you're on the phone. We just love to. What's your one word? We're going to be using this to help our vision statement, help develop our vision statement. So give us that one word, like I said, either in the chat or feel free to hit *3 and share that with us.
Awesome. Evan, you were cutting out there. You're back with us?
I believe so. I apologize for that, but I think that's an opportunity to talk about infrastructure and broadband connectivity, right?
There you go.
Absolutely.
Yes. Sam, if you please do let me know if I cut out again.
Okay, I will.
Thank you all for your comments on the vision. We do encourage you to visit the website at denvermoveseveryone.com, where you have the opportunity to weigh in again on vision and our goals moving forward. Now, to talk a little bit about our goals. Over the last 3 months, we've gone through a very deliberate process and have had over 11,000 touch points with residents across our city. We've really been focused on kind of understanding community values, understanding what you care about, what you expect from the transportation system. All these opportunities have really led us to learn from a variety of Denverites across our city. On the next slide, we're being very intentional about understanding who we're hearing from so that this overall plan and this engagement process is inclusive and representative as possible. Tracking the demographics, understanding where people live, what their context is, how often people weigh in on transportation plans like this is important to us. Because truly your feedback matters. Your voice matters in this plan, and this is your transportation plan. Being very deliberate in understanding how your input will influence our vision, our outcomes, our goals. Also taking into account, speaking of partnerships, how important it is for us to understand what some of our city priorities are, what some of the things our partners are planning for overall. So we're being very deliberate in understanding and making the connection between your feedback and our critical plan elements. As we mentioned, over the last 3 months, we've gone out and really asked residents across the city, what do you care about? What do you value? What do you expect from the transportation system? And people had an opportunity to express these in a number of different ways. And what you're seeing here is the relationship between those values that we're hearing from our residents, from our persons of colors, from our steering committee and partners, and then also many of the things that we're planning for as an organization and across our city. We're seeing significant values in terms of how comfortable our streets are, how safe and secure they are, how we address climate change, how we think about equity, social and racial justice in our transportation system, and how we think about just how we move around and the state of preservation and good repair of those assets and those infrastructures. We've taken all these values collectively and really been diligent about informing our overall goals for this plan. Those goals include mobility, how we move around, safety, how we feel, how comfortable we are, sustainability, how we address climate change and understand the connections between transportation and the environment, community, how do we make those neighborhoods and streets more comfortable? How do we be intentional about the connections between land use and transportation? And then quality, how can we improve the maintenance and condition of the infrastructure across all of our assets and for all travelers? These are our draft goal areas. They are again intended to help us then define metrics and investment priorities and resources so that we can build a performance-driven plan that will prioritize investments and actions and strategies across these goals. We've also heard many other important issues arise from our community values, and this plan will be directly rooted in what you care about and what you've told us is important. Social and racial justice, how equitable our transportation system is, absolutely rises to the top as a cross-cutting theme that should be addressed across all of these goal areas. Similarly, public health, technology, economic development, and other issues will be addressed across each of these goal areas. Finally, this plan will achieve together key outcomes for every resident and every traveler across our city. If we work to make progress with our partners, with our funding, with our data and our prioritization in each of these goal areas, we should be able to achieve a healthier city, safer streets, and connected places for each and every traveler in every neighborhood across our city. Those are really the draft goal areas of this plan, based in our community values that we've heard over the last couple of months, based directly on what some of the things you're hearing and reaffirming for us tonight through your chats and comments. Again, this is a critical element to building out our performance-based plan and prioritizing those investments and understanding the impact of those investments and projects and programs on those goals, keeping us all aligned in the same direction. Again, we encourage you to visit denvermoveseveryone.com, provide additional feedback here, but we'd like to hear a little bit more from you tonight on those specific goal topics.
So what we'd like to do a little bit different this time, we're going to pull up a Zoom poll. For those of you on Zoom, for those of you on the call, star 3. Really, the question is, let's go back, and if we can go back to those goals so everybody can see them, like to bring those up and take a look at those. Do you see yourself? Do you see your values? Have we missed anything? And so definitely answer the Zoom poll as you see it, or like I said, if you're on the phone, hit star 3. And we would love to hear what your thoughts are. We've got a few more minutes in this meeting, so I'd love to open it up now. Have your thoughts on goals. Love your thoughts on what we're missing, but also want to open up to any questions that you have. There's a lot of really exciting discussions going on in the chat, and we'll get back into some of those, but feel free to answer the Zoom poll to let us know what your thoughts are, and especially if you think we're missing. If you take a look at these goals and you think, gosh, we're really not addressing this one thing that I feel passionate about, my goodness, we want to know that, because this is our opportunity. So a couple of questions that have gone in while you're thinking about that. Sam, I think this is fascinating. I've been watching the chat questions, and there's a lot of questions about this sort of the carrot versus the stick. So how do you talked at one point in answering a question about changing behavior and how it is somewhat difficult to change behavior. And so there's been questions about, do you do it through incentivizing positive behavior, or do you do it by punishing or doing something a little bit negative to drive a change behavior, or is it some combination? There's a great comment that says carrots, for pedestrians, bikes, and transit, sticks for personal cars and trucks. So I was just curious if your thoughts on that from the city's perspective.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that the response to that is the motivation that people have to walk, to bike, to take transit, or to drive alone have been discussed. I've just been looking at the chat tonight based on level of comfort and feeling of safety, actually being safe, and that perception of safety. Is it convenient? Is it reliable? Can you trust you know, that bus is going to come on time and get you there by the time you need to be at the office. And so when we think about carrots and sticks, we won't explicitly define them, but we do know that making a choice to use different modes of transportation is heavily influenced by all those factors. And that currently in the way that our transportation system is designed, oftentimes driving may be the fastest or the most convenient, or people may feel safer taking that than other forms of transportation. But if we can create more balance across our system, cities across the country have recognized that there are shifts in more people taking those ways to move across the city. Fundamentally, as our city continues to grow, if we're going to avoid gridlock and being stuck in traffic, we need to consider how we can move more people. I talked about that straw example. More people are moving here. And if everyone was to bring their own vehicle, you can think that traffic would inevitably get worse. But if we can move more people by making those kind of carrots of safer, comfortable, more convenient, and reliable, data does show that more people tend to take the bus, tend to take the train, walk, or bike. So we want to think about what are those motivating factors that people use to make transportation decisions, and create a transportation system that fundamentally provides more options.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Sam. We are getting some questions in the chat. I recognize that we're not going to be able to reach to everyone, especially we've got over 2,000 people on the phone. So I do apologize if we've missed your comment in the chat. Feel free to put it back in, but know that we are saving every single piece of feedback we are getting, and we are going to review every single piece of feedback we're getting. So I do apologize if we've missed somebody, but just so you know, that's just because we've got so many people on the call. We're not necessarily sort of picking and choosing. So with that, another question for Elena. It says, what is DOTI's connection to work toward the CASR and the Climate Task Force climate reduction goals? You know, so how do we tie together with that climate office?
Yeah, great question. As I mentioned before, transportation is such a critical piece of meeting our climate goals. So we're working closely with, for everyone, the CASR, CASR, the Climate Office for Denver, Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency. So, I mean, the role is really to help make transportation able to meet those climate goals and reduce emissions. So it needs to be a holistic approach where we're reducing emissions that come from our buildings, where we're transitioning to renewable energy, as well as addressing the emissions from our transportation system. So throughout this plan, many staff from the Climate Office are involved in the plan and advising to make sure, and I think you can see that reflected in the goals, that climate and the environment is a critical piece, and we need to be making sure that the city is working across different agencies and not just limited to the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, but also how we're doing land use and parks. So there is a holistic approach there across the city.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Interesting comments around, really some interesting comments about, you know, we think about transportation within the city and county of Denver, but some of us are driven to our cars more because you're actually trying to get outside of Denver. So making sure that we're evaluating and working closely with busing and RTD and providing multimodal options that connect for people that are coming in and out of the city as well. I think that's a really great observation. We have some suggestions about implementing a bicycle licensing program through the DMV. This is an individual who's a cyclist herself that, you know, maybe a little additional training could help some of the safety issues on the bicyclist side, you know, and then we also have the issues on the car side. Let's see, let's take a look at our results. Lucy, how are we looking in terms of the goals? All right, so in general, it looks like we are focusing pretty much on strongly agree, but we do have some folks that are disagreeing, and I would love to hear a little bit more about that. So if you're on the phone, hit *3, or if you put it in your chat, please let us know why you're disagreeing, especially if you're strongly disagreeing, and what we're missing, because we really, really, really want to make sure that we have the opportunity to capture the information. And if you're not agreeing, this is your opportunity to tell us now. So please add that in the chat, and we will take a look at that as well. Let's see. So that's 88% agreeing is what the tool is showing right now. But again, we want to hear from the people that don't necessarily agree. So definitely put your thoughts in if you have them. Just kind of looking through. So any thoughts on what you specifically might disagree with, or what we're missing in goals? Anything on that? Not really seeing anything on the chat on that. We sure would love to hear. Okay, so we have a question or a comment about where are the incentives here? Convenience, cost. So that's a good question. So how does the money piece flow into these goals? Sam, Evan, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So Denver Moves Everyone will include a financial analysis. So we want to do an evaluation of what it's going to take to reach the goals and the benchmarks that we established through this plan, and then understanding, do the current financial strategies we have available today, are they sufficient to meet those needs over the timeline of the plan? So we'll continue to report back, and we'll actually have some exciting tools that we share with the community in the future to enable you to help us program how DOTI spends, makes its investments across all of those different pieces of infrastructure that we've discussed tonight. Fundamentally, we can't have everything, and we don't have unlimited resources. So we need to prioritize our dollars in a fashion that has the best opportunity to make progress on the goals that we established through this plan.
Great, thank you, Sam. Evan, what about efficiency? Did we consider that as part of when we were developing the goals?
A great word, and it does end in Y, which kind of fits with some of the communication elements that we are looking at in our goals. I absolutely think efficiency and convenience and ease and comfort and dignity would be another great Y word. Really kind of thinking those are some of those cross-cutting themes. Really, how can we be efficient in the delivery of services and the delivery of mobility across our goals, and as a relatively new department. So really kind of looking at, again, as a critical element internally and externally. There is a significant focus through the Denver Moves Everyone effort in really improving the capabilities and capacity of the Department of Transportation Infrastructure in terms of data and analytical tools, things that will really set us up for success and set this plan up for success and implementation and making action and taking the great body of work that's out there in existing plans and funding those projects to make progress.
Excellent. We also have some comments about, and maybe this is a good one for you, Sam, talking about that last phase of the project, because we are getting some questions about how do we make this real? That we are in a planning process. We've got a lot of great ideas. There's some encouragement. I like it. Aim high and make bold plans. I think that's wonderful feedback. But how is it that we're going to make sure that these are grounded in reality and we actually implement them and we can actually track our implementation? Sam, would you like to do this a little bit?
Julie, great question. Thanks for the folks who asked that. And so our requirement for this plan is twofold. We need to be visionary. We need to think about what it's going to take to build the transportation system of the future that through this planning process is valued and across the spectrum, that is, provides mobility options that's safe, sustainable, connects our community to our neighborhoods, provides high quality infrastructure, and is equitable. And at the same time, we need to be thinking about how do we develop an action-oriented plan that results in projects, programs, and policies that move us closer to those long-term visionary goals. So we're doing both in concert. As I discussed earlier about the phases of the project, we'll be developing recommendations for projects to implement in the near term that move us closer to reaching these goals. And at the same time, we're thinking about what are those additional shifts in the way that we do business that we need to have on track in the midterm, looking 10 years out, 20 years out, and 30 years out to 2050 so that we can stay on track. Denver Moves Everyone is not going to be a plan that's wrapped up in November of 2022 and we are done, pencils down. This is a way that we can become a more performance-driven organization and use data to continually track progress on how we're reaching the goals that we established through this effort.
Thank you, Sam. We got an interesting comment here that I think maybe we could address a little bit, that someone disagreed with the goals. Said somewhat more disagree than agree, but the reality is for this individual, he feels like, he has to have a car given where he is living in Denver. And there seems to be a lot of discussion going on about other modes of transportation. So we're still factoring cars into our overall plan, right, Sam?
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the things we're doing through this plan is we're evaluating the proportion of trips that we want to have in the future when it comes to travel to work or travel to other places. And we'll be evaluating our mobility action plan goals, which do emphasize a mode share of driving above 50%. And so the majority of people, it's expected, will still need to drive for many trips. But we want to create through this plan more balance so that it's safe, convenient, accessible, and reliable to have more transportation choices to move across the system. As our city continues to grow, we need to think about additional solutions to provide transportation choices that may not be available. So this plan is not oriented at a future where driving isn't a reliable option. It's creating more balance across the transportation system so that other choices are competitive and people see them as safe, convenient, and reliable ways to move across Denver. So fundamentally, we can move everyone in our city as we look to the future.
Well, that's great, Sam. And there's some follow-up comments to say, you know what, I have to drive a car, but boy, I sure would like the option not to. So I think that fits very nicely with kind of how you frame that. Evan, another comment we got is, I'd love to see the word flexibility. So that's another really good word for us. Is that something we're going to be evaluating in terms of streets with switchable lanes or signals that can go to flashing overnight, or, areas, maybe a block off areas that are no cars on the weekends, things like that. Will those be things that we'll be considering as part of this?
Thank you, Julie. I did see that comment and do appreciate all the Y words that are coming in, but flexibility and agility for this plan is again kind of what we're trying to do, to think about the future and plan for a future that is very uncertain. So recognizing those kind of innovative solutions that are in practice in many places around the world, and then being able to test some of the effectiveness of those policies as best we can. As we kind of move into our second phase of the effort and really kind of exploring alternative futures and evaluating the impacts of different interventions and programs and policies, using models and data and tools to the best extent possible, we'll be kind of looking at some of those flexibility impacts. What would be the impact of pricing parking or pricing vehicles coming into the city's downtown core? What are some of the other opportunities if we can flex our system to serve and move more and more people? We can kind of begin to model and estimate that. And that directly goes into, what again do we, in terms of projects and investments and actions, do we need to prioritize to meet these goals? So love the concept of flexibility and agility. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. And to build on that, we also got a comment about maybe instead of safe streets, maybe we should be talking about safe connections. That's something to think about. I kind of like that as well. Let's see what else. We only have a few more minutes, so let's maybe go through the last couple of slides, and then we can open it up for any final questions that you might have. So if you want to move to kind of what comes next. So next slide, please. So we are very excited. Keep a lookout. You are going to see a deliverable coming out within the next month or so. It is going to be our State of the System report. This will be the first time that you'll actually get to start seeing some of the feedback and the feedback that you've been providing to us, the feedback we've been receiving from the public and our stakeholders and our partners, and talk a little bit about what is Denver Moves Everyone, who is DOTI. We've reviewed some of that here. Where have we been? So we're going to look historically, because it's so important to look backwards to determine where we're going. what is our state of the system and what is next? So we're very excited. This is going to be, again, the first time you're going to see fundamentally some of this feedback that we are providing to us. And I love the history components of it, because the way we're viewing this is we recognize that there have been policy decisions that made in the past that have had certain consequences to the reality we live in today. And so really hoping that encourages us to work together to make sure that we're making and framing the best policy decisions moving forward. And we'd love your help on this. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, you are the foundation for this. As Sam went through, here's our different steps. We are in the process of setting the foundation, but we're going to be moving very quickly into our next steps. How we should transform our transportation system. What are challenges? What are the opportunities you see? So denvermoveseveryone.com, you were going to hear that several times at this presentation. So denvermoveseveryone.com. We would love for you to participate in that and give us your thoughts. So with that is the bulk of the presentation, but we're just a reminder of how to reach us. But we do have a couple minutes left and love to open it up to additional comments and questions. Keep the chat going. Like I said, we are going to make sure that we capture every comment that we've gotten. We will evaluate every comment we've gotten. We are also we have been recording this session, and we were going to be recording the session. We will be putting it on the denvergov.org website, as well as with a copy of this presentation. So you will absolutely be able to follow up as well on this. So with that, we've got a time for a few more questions. We got a great question. So what do we know? What's the plan going to look like? I think that's a great question. What will it provide? A menu of investment options? How will those options interrelate to other plans in the city? So what can we talk a little bit about the structure of the plan itself?
Yeah, Evan, maybe I can jump in quick. So in reality, the pandemic has made us recognize that we may continue in a virtual setting, and it's kind of made us rethink the 8.5 by 11 plan report. So we are anticipating that some aspects of the report will be made in a digital format so that it's really easy to digest the key takeaways from the plan. For DOTI as a guiding document, we do still anticipate that there'll be a formal document and report that we create that really can serve as our roadmap for implementing the plan's recommendations. But I did want to emphasize, we're working hard to consider how we can make this not a very long document for the public to work through. In terms of integration of our other planning efforts, we're working really hard to ensure that the recommendations from past plans are integrated into the process for the Denver Moves Everyone recommendations. And so to answer that question briefly, yes, we are looking backwards. What's been recommended in the past? What has prevented some of those recommendations from moving forward so that we can have a more streamlined process into the future to deliver high priority projects across the city.
Terrific. Thank you, Sam. And just to clarify, I should have been a little clear on this. We are not only going to be reviewing and evaluating all your comments, we're actually going to be responding to them as well. And we will put a public facing frequently asked questions document on the website to address these as well. So just so you know, we're not, if we didn't get to you tonight, we're going to follow up and make sure that there is a document that answers those questions.
Julie,
yeah, please.
I just was going to make a quick.
Oh no. There
Everyone, we go. Consider that our hub for seeking engagement on the project. But if you'd like more background information, if you want that meeting recording or their FAQ, we're going to be posting that at bit.ly/Denver Moves Everyone. So I've dropped that in the chat a couple times, and I just wanted to emphasize that there's two places to get information about the project. One where we're really seeking input, and one where we're sharing information, whether it be background or the meetings that we've held to date, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. And don't forget, you can always call us on the project hotline or email us directly as well. And that goes straight to the project team. And you can do that in multiple languages, and we'll get right back to you as well. So a couple of other just quick questions as we got another minute or two. I've got a great question there. I keep using the term stakeholders, and who do I mean by that? Isn't that everybody? And you're absolutely right. Stakeholders are everybody. We're talking about transportation. There is nobody individual that lives in the city and county of Denver that is not impacted by transportation. So we use that term very broadly, but yes, it absolutely means the general public. It means our partners in other organizations, our partners in other agencies, the RTDs and the CDOTs and things like that. So I apologize, we're using that term very, very generically. let's see, we've got lots of other stuff. We only have a couple more minutes. Maybe this is a good one to kind of end on. You know, we're getting a lot of questions, Sam, about, well, now how do we pay for all this moving forward? We're going to come up with all these wonderful ideas. Where do we go next? So maybe that's a good way to sort of wrap things up from here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're and again, I'm kind of emphasizing the state of the system report. So we're going to be documenting how DOTI receives funding today and how do we program that funding today across all of our different programs. And as we look to the future, we need to understand how do we program and fund future transportation investments recommended in this plan. And so we'll be evaluating all of the different sources of revenue that DOTI receives, whether that be bond issuances such as the 2017 Elevate Denver bond, whether that be grant resources, their state and federal dollars to fund transportation. Think about the American Jobs Act that is coming soon. And then we need to think about local revenue sources as well. So we will be evaluating today how we receive resources and then looking into the future how that may need to change in order to implement the recommendations developed through this plan.
Terrific. Thank you so much. We have come to the end of our time. This has been a wonderful, wonderful experience. Thank you so much for everybody participating. Again, we are going to take a look at the chat. We will be answering those questions. We will be posting them on the website. So we will get back to you if we haven't been able to address all of your comments. But again, this is such an important study. This is so important for the city, and your engagement is really helping us drive the future of investments for transportation in the city. So with that, I want to say thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being so interactive, and thank you for all your thoughts and inputs. And we'll look forward to responding, like I said, online, and keep an eye out because we'll be doing this again in a few months. So thank you so much, Sam. Jen, does anybody have any final thoughts before we log off?
I just was going to put it in the chat, but thanks everyone. This has been really helpful and insightful for us to understand your priorities, your thoughts, and I just keep reading these ideas. Great idea, great idea. We need to take that into account. So know that as soon as tomorrow, we're going to be turning around and collaborating with each other to react to your comments and integrate them into the plan's next step. So huge thanks for joining us this evening. We really appreciate it. Jen or Evan, if you want to say thanks too, or we can wrap.
Agreed. You know, just thank you all for your engagement. We will take all of this into consideration, and this is the first step, and there will be many more engagement opportunities. So please reach out as you guys soak in all this information. If there's other things that we need to be considering, please let us know. But we will be in touch, and really appreciate your time tonight. Thanks all.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.